Sanford.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I know a bunch of people on the phone, and I'm assuming that a number of you are making a sandwich or watching daytime TV or something, because you know you've seen this show from me, or some version of it, numerous times. I've given something very close to this probably about a dozen times this spring. Nevertheless, I will forge ahead and try to give everybody an update on where we are. First thing I should say, if you see the title slide, Who's Minding the Store? My name comes right after that. I am not the only one minding the store. Everybody on this call is part of it. Lots of state agencies, the council, the soon-to-be advisory committee, and all the other partners throughout New York State. And hopefully that will become clear as we go through this thing. And just by way of introduction, I know everybody here knows a lot about invasive species, but I think one of the things to keep in mind is that it's a very broad and complex topic. I think a lot of us, like myself, come to this from the ecosystem perspective, but beyond that, particularly with some of you may have heard we had a false alarm on emerald ash borer last week. Happy it was a false alarm, but the managed systems like forests are certainly a concern. But food supply, ag and markets is our co-leader partner in this endeavor. Harvested fish, wildlife, shellfish, all sorts of built environs, and many sectors of outdoor recreation are all affected by invasive species. So it's just something we all need to keep in mind, even though we might each have our own little sector that we're most concerned with. With what we're trying to accomplish here, we're trying to manage the entire invasive problem across the entire state with all the different partners and stakeholders. And most of you probably recall that a few years ago, New York State law was passed that created a task force the membership of which was laid out right in the law, 17-member organizations, including government agencies and conservation groups and trade groups and academia. And the charge was to report to the governor and legislature on the problem of invasive species, and mostly what did New York need to do about it. And over a 2-year period, we put together a report and got it to the legislature. And it's been somewhat effective because since that time, we've had some real progress, which we'll be talking about. But one of these little facts, which is hard to ignore, is the rate of invasion is so rapid. I think that's why society and elected officials are really turning their attention to this in recent years. But this list here is probably just a partial list of the species that we know invaded New York State since the task force was first established 4 years ago. There is good news, though. Most of the recommendations of the task force are being implemented with Environmental Protection Fund dollars. And the way I've always looked at our task, and again, I mean our in the largest sense here, is to equip everybody in New York, whether it's agencies or their partners, to be prepared to meet all the different challenges that come from invasive species. This structure of strategic elements is something that actually was in the original legislation, and that was borrowed from the federal efforts at management planning for invasive species, and it's a very useful framework that carries through in everything that we do. The important message that I see is that you can't just do one component and say that you're doing what you need to do for invasive species. You need to have a comprehensive effort that nourishes all the different components of the effort. And as we have been going forward and as we've gotten resources to actually implement the recommendations, there are a few principles that have guided us. And one of the most important ones is that we're delivering the program primarily through our partners as opposed to simply growing state agency programs. And trying to put our money where our mouth is. Most of the Environmental Protection Fund resources that we have available are going out to partners. The new statute that was finally passed in 2008 created both a council and an advisory committee. We'll talk more about those, but that was one of the recommendations to follow the federal model. And finally, the actual staff that both here and at Ag and Markets that are dedicated to the support of the council. I just learned yesterday afternoon that we can finally put on board our 4th person here at DEC, and you all know, I think, that Diane Getke started just a few weeks ago at Ag and Markets as their invasive species coordinator. So things really are moving along. Okay, and throughout all these presentations, it's no coincidence that the PRISMs really are the focal point and one concept and value that we try to get across to everybody that we're talking with. I've had lots of opportunities to work with the legislature on invasive species issues, and I think a lot of the legislators know what the acronym PRISM stands for and understands the critical importance that they have in delivering programs throughout the state. So I'm real happy to be on this call, and everything that we can do to help PRISMs be effective is a very high priority with us. This is, I'm sure you've all seen this map of what things look like, and we hope look like across the state. The solid lines being the kind of the older established PRISMs, and the dashed lines, the rapidly catching up newer PRISMs all around the state. It's been very impressive to hear all the good foundation work that the newer PRISMs have been doing to really get up and running. The core functions, this slide actually looks an awful lot like the earlier strategic elements slide, and rightfully so. The idea with the PRISMs is to have all the components of a comprehensive program being delivered at that regional level. And hopefully we'll be providing the support for more centralized things, whether it's research from the Research Institute or education and outreach through Cornell Cooperative Extension. I'll talk more about each of these later, but there is a job to be done at the local level through the PRISMs for every component of a comprehensive program. And this graphic just tries to depict the central role that the PRISMs have in being effective around the state. I'm sure you could draw a much more complex diagram than this to really capture everything, but the idea is to have meaningful connection and integrations to all the different parts of the system that we're trying to establish here. Okay, the next bunch of slides I'm going to go through track the 12 recommendations of the original task force report. Basically, our whole effort is built on those 12 recommendations. The way we spend money, the way we plan our work, everything else, we're kind of hanging on to those 12 recommendations for our structure here. And as already mentioned, the number one was to have a permanent leadership and coordination function in New York following the federal model. And in fact, this, starting last year, but finally amended and firmed up this year, the council was established in a new Title 17 of Environmental Conservation Law, Article 9, which is actually part of Lands and Forest Law. And the structure is that, again, mirrors the federal structure, a council with agency reps only on it, advised by an advisory committee, which are all non-agency reps, 25 different groups. And some of you may be aware that we're in the process of establishing and populating the advisory committee. Right now, the names of 24 of the 25 individuals are over at the governor's office, appointments office, and we've been told they really haven't been doing anything because the session, I guess, just ended yesterday or maybe even today. So until the session's over, they weren't going to turn their attention. So I'm hoping soon they'll shake loose the list of advisory committee members, and we can go ahead and actually schedule the first meeting and get that up and running. And again, as of yesterday, really, our coordination office will have the 4 staff in it that we foresee in the near future. I'll be able to announce the individual within a day or two. The council members are the 9 agencies here. Just like with the task force, Ag and Markets and DEC are the co-leaders. We've had 2 meetings already. Our 3rd meeting, we believe, is going to be August 15th in Raybrook. I just sent out an announcement moments ago to the council members, and so the presumption is that's the date and location. The date could conceivably change if some of the council members object strongly, but we've given them not quite 2 months lead time, so hopefully everybody can be there. And these are open meetings, so anybody's welcome to attend. As I mentioned on the advisory committee, we're in the process there. The statute describes a really broad stakeholder representation. A lot of the slots are actually identified right in the statute. We had some discretion as to which groups could be represented there. And the functions of both the council, the advisory committee, and our office here is, as the words say, coordinate with everybody in New York, all the stakeholders, anybody that cares about invasive species, communicate with the elected officials, identifying program needs and especially resource needs. It's fabulous to have gone from $0 to $5 million in just a few short years, but anybody who's close to this process knows that we need a whole lot more in the way of resources to really be able to defend ourselves against invasives. And we'll develop programs, do what we can to get more resources, and implement all the specific tasks that are right in Title 17. Here's the office here at DEC. Leslie's sitting next to me. Dave Adams is over in the other room working probably on the 4-tier list system, which is his #1 priority. And our planning coordinator will actually appear here in Albany on the 7th of July. And I have a big folder of things for that person to dive into the first day they get here. I don't have on that slide, have Diane Getke over at Ag and Markets, but everybody should know that we've kind of adopted Diane as part of the office, and we are working together as one big unit. We copy each other on all our communications and get together and frequently and speak frequently, so I should probably add her name to that slide as well the next time I revise this. And speaking of which, recommendation #2 was to prepare a comprehensive management plan. We did a report a few years ago. It was not a management plan, and Diane over at Ag and Markets has the lead on this. It will be contracted out, and we are working through the RFP that will be issued soon in order to find a contractor to do that work. But it really needs to, as this slide says, basically establish who needs to be doing what, under what authority, what resources do they have, and how does everything fit together. In the early stages, identifying those gaps that are out there right now, I think is one of the most important things we can do. There are lots of missing pieces that somehow we need to have a strategy to secure. Allocating appropriate resources, recommendation #3. Again, in a short period of time, we've come from $0. I should have corrected that. That 08-09 figure is $5 million, not $4 million. We've come a long way in a short period of time, but we're not done asking yet. #4, a comprehensive education and outreach effort. As much as possible throughout all this stuff, we're trying not to reinvent the wheel. We have selected Cornell Cooperative Extension to contract with us to provide this function, and the PRISMs are a key component in the system that we envision. Ultimately, we hope to have a cooperative extension individual, quote, assigned to each of the PRISMs. So we'll ultimately have 8 cooperative extension people working on invasive species, but we're hoping that the 8 people will more or less represent 8 different specialties or disciplines, so that they can also function as their own team, and anyone in New York State or any need that we have for outreach and education, we ought to be able to go to cooperative extension and have them, whether it's outreach materials, or website information or literature or training or anything that has to do with outreach, communications, messages, or TV, radio, all that sort of stuff. We're going to turn to them first. And of course, they're going to use not only their expertise, but all the connections they have both within New York and across the country to help find the best information. So they're well positioned to do that. They're going to coordinate clearly with each of the PRISMs, but also integrate with the Research Institute and with the Information Clearinghouse through Sea Grant. So all the information and outreach and education needs we have, they're going to be the first people we turn to. Okay, information, databases, and the Information Clearinghouse. The Natural Heritage Program and Sea Grant are the contractors we'll be using there. The Natural Heritage Program is going to provide a locational database I think of as the map for invasive species for New York State. Ultimately, it'll be available on the web, some of it to everybody, some of it just to certain people with certain clearances that can get in and do things. But it's for all species. It's a GIS for all taxa. Obviously, they're going to link to a lot of other similar sites in other states and around the world, and also help us identify and meet the needs and a clear need to integrate with the Information Clearinghouse. The Clearinghouse, through Sea Grant, we think of as the library for New York State on invasive species. Also available on the web, also all taxa, lots of opportunity to link with other information sources, and clearly needs to be integrated with the database. The database will tell you where something is, but if you want to find out information about the biology or management of invasive species, you go to the Clearinghouse. A regular invasive species conference. The concept here is to keep up, maintain the public interest and knowledge level and opportunity to interact with other people who care about invasive species. A little more than a year ago, we were able to support the Invasive Plant Council's meeting here in Albany. And for any of you who were there, you probably saw how exciting it was to have standing room only, lots of interest, lots of participation. There were a couple other conferences that we also supported, as you see there, and most recently the Natural History Conference right here in Albany. Potentially, we're looking at a summit. The new statute says we need to do this at least once every 2 years. 2009 is let me back up to the 2009 is the 400th anniversary of Henry Hudson bringing invasives to New York State, so we thought we might try to celebrate that next year somehow. Numbers 7 and 9 I kind of threw together here because formalizing New York State policy and practices and coordinating and streamlining regulatory processes are intertwined. There are still some things that agencies do that are counterproductive from an invasive species perspective, or they're missing opportunities to help prevent the spread of invasive species. Similarly, with the regulatory processes, there are times when agency laws or policies or even practices, regulations, can stand in the way of doing the right thing with invasive species. Particularly, they're a stumbling block to rapid response. So we have Dave Adams on as our regulatory coordinator, and his first job is the 4-tier list, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, but his second job is to try to remove some of those stumbling blocks so all the regulatory processes can still do their job of protecting the environmental concerns, but not stand in the way of solving some invasive species problems. Four-tier system is right in the new statute. The name comes from the one used by the state of Minnesota. It's a bit of a misnomer because there's not really 4 tiers. There's 3 lists and a procedure. We have to report to the legislature by January 2010. Dave has put together a team that's met a few times already, and again, trying to cover the whole waterfront of all the different taxa. And we have to come up with lists of, a banned list of prohibited species, a second list of regulated species, a green list, so-called, of unregulated species, but most importantly, we have to come up with the procedure or the process for listing any species and how they fall out on each of the above 3. So Dave's got a real good team together, and he knows that it's one of those tasks that you can't relax from. You got to just keep moving on it in order to make the deadline. And it's early in the process, but there's going to be a big outreach component to air out the proposed lists and processes long before we get to the report stage, so that anybody with an interest or concern about the regulatory aspects of invasive species will have an opportunity to participate. Holly Menninger is Menninger, right, Holly? Has just been hired by Cornell University to be the director or executive director of a new invasive species research institute. And they have a large mission there. One of the first things I imagine Holly will be doing will be putting together an advisory board to help the institute do its work. And among the things they need to do are to catalog all the existing research that's going on, particularly within New York State, but elsewhere as well. Help identify the needs and help us, by us I mean the council, help us prioritize the research needs, identify researchers, identify some other funding sources, and recommend those priorities to the council. And then down the road, track the progress and report back to the council. So a lot of work to be done there, but I'm real pleased that Cornell has found an excellent person in Holly, and I haven't met her yet, but look forward to doing so next month. And again, this graphic just kind of depicts how we have tried to integrate the Research Institute into this system that we're building. Pretty much everything needs to be connected to everything else. The prisms, we certainly envision that there are going to be opportunities for data collection that will feed the needs of the Research Institute and vice versa. If there are research needs that the prisms identify, we will have ways to convey that information to the Institute. If the Institute needs people out on the ground with eyes and ears and feet trying to collect information, we'll be able to accomplish that as well. On the topic of research, we, I guess last year's budget, we did segregate out $100,000 to help with what we're calling public enemy number 2, some applied research being done at Cornell. Some of you may know Baron Flossie, who is literally one of the world leaders in biocontrol for invasive species. He had developed a lot of the work on purple loosestrife, which was our #1 public enemy in New York. And so he was midway through investigating biocontrol for frags, was running out of funding. DOT, particularly in the person of Kyle Williams, was able to get some federal dollars to meet most of the need, but by throwing in $100,000, we were able to help close that gap. So we're very excited. We hope that the investigation is successful and that we do find some effective biocontrol for frags. We made that decision because we didn't have an institute up and running yet that would be able to look at all the different research needs and advise the council on what priorities might be. We used the available information we had, didn't want to wait to spend that money, but in the future The idea is that the Research Institute will, in a much more authoritative and comprehensive way, be able to advise the Council on what research ought to be done to help us here in New York. Number 10 was some non-regulatory approaches, and one of those is a contract, and another is something we've just begun to talk about. The first one, being done through Ag and Markets, is a contract with the Ag Experiment Station out in Geneva to basically find a way to ensure that the planting stock of certain small fruits is clean of viruses, so that growers would know when they're establishing their orchards that the stock is virus-free. And that's been, again, administered by Ag and Markets and is up and running, and that's going to be a real service to the so-called green industries. Let me just back up once again. The last bullet is the protocol for voluntary self-certification. One thing, it's kind of in development now, but we are also, Troy Weldy, who's on the phone, and Diane over at Ag and Markets, and I have been talking about an outreach program with particularly the nursery industry. We'll be talking more about that in the future, but we want to work with them to find ways to kind of shift toward some non-invasive species that are now popular with the marketplace in New York State. Number 11 was influencing federal actions. That's something that's, again, our regulatory coordinator, Dave Adams, has a major role there, but this year especially, ballast water at the federal level is getting a lot of our attention. It seems like barely a day goes by that there's not some new iteration that we're responding to on that issue. Recommendation number 12 talks about what we're calling demonstration projects, and the PRISMs I've already talked about a lot. There's also an eradication grant program that started in 05-06. We've awarded $1 million the first year. The next time around in phase 2, we actually combined 2 fiscal years worth of money and extended it out to terrestrial species. And we're just planning the next phase now. I don't have a timeline yet as to when they're going to hit the ground, but each time we've awarded 3 dozen or so grants to municipalities and not-for-profits all around the state. Seems to be a very popular program, and we're hoping that the awardees are telling their legislators that this is popular and that there should be more money in the pipeline. And as I already mentioned, the first priorities, I guess the first one I'm kind of done with as of yesterday, that we're staffing up the offices. The advisory committee's in process. We need to firm up the spending plan for this year. Diane is working right along on the comprehensive plan, and Dave is working along on the 4-tier list process. So if there's